Hey there, it's that time again where we're going to have a conversation about normative ethics. There's a great viewpoint that is addressed by Dr. Owen Anderson as he studies and helps us to discover ways of understanding normative ethics. Originally, we look at ethics as a way to seek answers to certain questions. Those questions that seek finding the good and the bad in things. These questions that we question often help us find rational justification to answer certain questions about what is the good in order to know what choices are best for us achieving the good. Simply speaking, normative ethics actually seeks to help out in discovering the simple study of the question in itself. What ought I do? What should I do? This is the descriptive ethics of which it studies what answers individuals actually give to this question as it reflects the choices that we all make with regard to the good and applying ethics that help us to discover that true moral law or that moral compass. Throughout this particular conversation, some of the things that we will look at, we'll look at the true goals to studying ethics and why study ethics at all. Additionally, we will talk about immediate perceptions of the reality that people give reason to making choices and justifying their choices. We'll also explore knowing the good and finding examples and viewpoints that help us justify our justification of choice. Additionally, we will look into terms such as hedonism and faith and reason. These are aspects of the ways we distinguish between generally rationalizing our arguments of choice. We'll also look at culpable ignorance and how that affects making our choices. There's a couple of ways that we'll examine that as well. Additionally, we will look at the moral absolute, which regards virtue and material virtue versus natural virtues and those moral types of virtues. We'll look into different theorists and their viewpoint, such as Immanuel Kant and Aristotle, and of course the great Nietzsche, and the universalism aspect that Kant also discusses. We will also look into ways of how we actually identify the good and how we look at different terms as nominalism as well as existentialism. We'll also explore reality and how we view, or more specifically, determine our world views on our decision making. We will also look into knowing and how we think about the good and the variety of reasons that we seek in learning to think predisposably with our decision making. We'll look into great philosophers such as Aristotle, of course, and determine finding out about the knowing this moral law over the free will. Additionally, we'll look into the ought-can principle that is also part of gaining a worldview framework. Additionally, we will look at defining the clarity and responsibility of our human nature and how that affects our reasoning, more specifically, guiding us toward moral law. We will also examine different arguments and implications that also reflect normative ethics, that in all, there's really no rational justification to answer the question, what is good and what ought I do? So we're going to talk about how we kind of talk ourselves off the ladder, if you will, in self-contradictory, and how we can perhaps think ourselves into our reasoning process. We'll also talk about the good and the moral law, of course, and what is real, and how we establish the thinking of what is real. And also we will talk about the ethics of belief and the factors of W.K. Clifford and the skeptics that these beliefs that come out of the fetus that we talked about, of ways of we deal with these thinkings and rationalities and fallacies that often come into play. We will also talk about contradictions, and we'll also talk about the second rule, that is what must we learn to think. And we will talk about the rule that Clifford also gives examples using these pre-existing thought processes, such as distinguishing what came first, the chicken or the egg, and more specifically, how blurring of certain fundamentals do occur in different philosophies. We will also go into this third rule that speaks specifically for the ethics of belief, which is that we must have integrity, and we must also be consistent between identifying our beliefs, and what we say and believe and what we do as well. So these are pretty heavy-duty conversations that we will propose during this particular chapter and this topic, as we begin learning about the normative ethics, and finally learning into how this applies to the good and how God views this, or theism. So we have quite a bit to cover, and I'm certainly glad that we're going to do this together in developing the moral law and understanding integrity and the good. So thank you so much. Let's get right underway. This is Dr. Kim Eagles, and I cannot wait to dive into normative effects that have to do with communication ethics.